I will come." Ere the Shadow could reply, the tip of the moon's crescent horn peeped up from behind an icy pinnacle, and one slender ray fell on the lake. It shone upon no Shadows. Ere the eye of the king could again seek the earth, after beholding the first brightness of the moon's resurrection, they had vanished, and the surface of the lake glittered cold and blue in the pale moonlight. There the king lay, alone in the midst of the frozen lake, with the moon staring at him. But at length he heard from somewhere a voice that he knew. "Will you take another cup of tea, dear?" said Mrs. Rinkelmann. And Ralph, coming slowly to himself, found that he was lying in his own bed. "Yes, I will," he answered. "And rather a large piece of toast, if you please, for I have been a long journey since I saw you last." "He has not come to himself quite," said Mrs. Rinkelmann, between her and herself. "You would be rather surprised," continued Ralph, "if I told you where I had been." "I dare say I should," responded his wife. "Then I will tell you," rejoined Ralph. But at that moment a great Shadow bounced out of the fire with a single huge leap, and covered the whole room. Then it settled in one corner, and Ralph saw it shaking its fist at him from the end of a preposterous arm. So he took the hint and held his peace. And it was as well for him. For I happen to know something about the Shadows too, and I know that if he had told his wife all about it just then, they would not have sent for him the following evening. But as the king, after finishing his tea and toast, lay and looked about him, the Shadows dancing in his room seemed to him odder and more inexplicable than ever. The whole chamber was full of mystery. So it generally was, but now it was more mysterious than ever. After all that he had seen in the Shadow Church, his own room and its shadows were yet more wonderful and unintelligible than those. This made it the more likely that he had seen a true vision, for instead of making common things look commonplace, as a false vision would have done, it had made common things disclose the wonderful that was in them. "The same applies to all art as well," thought Ralph Rinkelmann. The next afternoon, as the twilight was growing dusky, the king lay, wondering whether or not the Shadows would fetch him again. He wanted very much to go, for he had enjoyed the journey exceedingly, and he longed, besides, to hear some of the Shadows tell their stories. But the darkness grew deeper and deeper, and the Shadows did not come. The cause was that Mrs. Rinkelmann sat by the fire in the gloaming, and they could not carry off the king while she was there. Some of them tried to frighten her away by playing the oddest pranks on the walls, the floor, and ceiling, but altogether without effect. The queen only smiled, for she had a good conscience. Suddenly, however, a dreadful scream was heard from the nursery, and Mrs. Rinkelmann rushed upstairs to see what was the matter. No sooner had she gone than the two warders of the chimney corners stepped out into the middle of the room, and said in a low voice, "Is your Majesty ready?" "Have you no hearts?" said the king, "or are they as black as your faces? Did you not hear the child scream? I must know what is the matter with her before I go." "Your Majesty may keep his mind easy on that point," replied the warders. "We had tried everything we could think of to get rid of her Majesty the Queen, but without effect. So a young madcap Shadow, half against the will of the older ones of us, slipped upstairs into the nursery, and has, no doubt,
succeeded in appalling the baby, for he is very lithe and long-legged. Now, your majesty."
"I will have no such tricks played in my nursery," said the king rather angrily. "You might put the child beside itself."
"Then there would be twins, your majesty, and we rather like twins."
"None of your miserable jesting. You might put the child out of her wits."
"Impossible, sire, for she has not got into them yet."
"Go away," said the king.
"Forgive us, your majesty. Really, it will do the child good, for that shadow will all her life be to her a symbol of what is ugly and bad. When she feels in danger of hating or envying anyone, that shadow will come back to her mind and make her shudder."
"Very well," said the king. "I like that. Let us go." The Shadows went through the same ceremonies and preparations as before, during which the young Shadow before mentioned contrived to make such grimaces as kept the baby in terror and the queen in the nursery, till all was ready. Then, with a bound that doubled him up against the ceiling, and a kick of his legs 6 feet out behind him, he vanished through the nursery door, and reached the king's bedchamber just in time to take his place with the last who were melting through the window in the rear of the litter, and settling down upon the snow beneath. Away they went as before, a gliding blackness over the white carpet. And it was Christmas Eve. When they came in sight of the mountain lake, the king saw that it was crowded over its whole surface with a changeful intermingling of shadows. They were all talking and listening alternately, in pairs, trios, and groups of every size. Here and there large companies were absorbed in attention to one elevated above the rest, not in a pulpit or on a platform, but on the stilts of his own legs, elongated for the nonce. The aurora, right overhead, lighted up the lake and the sides of the mountains, by sending down from the zenith, nearly to the surface of the lake, great folded vapours, luminous with all the colours of a faint rainbow. Many, however, as the words were that passed on all sides, not a shadow of a sound reached the ears of the king. The shadow speech could not enter his corporeal organs. One of his guides, however, seeing that the king wanted to hear and could not, went through a strange manipulation of his head and ears, after which he could hear perfectly, though still only the voice to which, for the time, he directed his attention. This, however, was a great advantage, and one which the king longed to carry back with him to the world of men. The king now discovered that this was not merely the church of the Shadows, but their news exchange at the same time. For, as the Shadows have no writing or printing, the only way in which they can make each other acquainted with their doings and thinkings is to meet and talk at this word-mart and parliament of shades. And, as in the world people read their favourite authors and listen to their favourite speakers, so here the Shadows seek their favourite shadows, listen to their adventures, and hear generally what they have to say. End of Section 1 of The Shadows, by George MacDonald.